we're just going to make a start. Hopefully other people will join us as the night goes on. Tonight, basically, we're here to talk about welfare reform. In other words, cuts. A lot of people out there believe that this isn't going to affect them. The people in the room tonight giving the presentation are going to outline exactly how these sort of cuts are going to affect people. It's going to have an impact on probably every one of us in the room in some shape or form. So it's better to listen in and get a wee bit of knowledge of it rather than say, listen, you know what, I'll worry about it when it comes to my door. So tonight we'll have Alison and Joe, and basically I'm not going to be taking part in any of it. I'm just going to leave them to it, and then I'm sure if any questions at the end we can certainly put them to them. So just ask everybody to put their phones on silent, so we're not having phones going off during the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, and thanks very much for the invitation along here this evening. First of all, maybe what I want to say, in case people are coming along to hear one thing, that I'm not a benefits expert. So I'm not the person here in the room who can fill your forms in for you, can help you, can tell you what to do. I think this lady beside me is one of those people who does have that expertise, but I suppose who I am is I am the General Secretary with NIPSA, one of the trade unions here in Northern Ireland, and have been heavily involved in the whole issue of welfare, what they call welfare reform, but it's really welfare cuts, and it's something that certainly we as a union have been fighting for now for probably the last 3 or 4 years. And like you, probably at one stage I thought this is never going to happen. But unfortunately, it is going to happen, and we can't keep our heads in the sand, because for everybody in this room and for all our families and friends, for people who live in this community, it's very real, it's going to be very real, and people are going to have less money in their pockets. So that might mean the corner shop might close, because we're all going to have less money to spend in our local community. So maybe to start off by saying, as I said, I am not a benefits expert, and there's many people in this room who are, I'm sure, but maybe some, as well as perhaps local community representatives who in your local constituency offices will have advice workers there who can provide some information on benefits. There's also what they call the Benefit Entitlement Unit in the Social Security Agency who can give you some advice. There's Advice NI, and there is the likes of the Citizens Advice Bureau. And my strong advice to you is, if you're currently claiming benefits, or if you're going to claim a benefit, or you're somebody in your family or your friends, is don't just go ahead and fill the form in. Because, and it's not about being honest or dishonest, it's about knowing the right words to use in a form. So you could use the same words and not get the right outcome. So people in the advice sector do have lots and lots of fill these forms in for people all of the time. They know the right words to use, and they know then what will save you having to potentially go through an appeal. So some of the things, you know, it's about keeping your head in the sand, and maybe it'll never happen, it'll not happen to me, and it's always something that's going to happen to somebody else. Well, the reality of the situation is that it's coming, and it's coming very soon. For example, but maybe before we get into what is the bad bits, some of the good bits that's going to come your way, and when I say good bits, better bits perhaps than people in the rest of the UK, so people living in Scotland, people living in England, people living in Wales, some of the things that they have that they would be envious of here in Northern Ireland. So one of the things is, and if you've read The Sun, the Daily Mirror, any other newspapers over the years, the last few years, you'll heard of something called the bedroom tax, where if you have a spare room or spare rooms in your house, and you're in receipt of benefit or social security benefits, is that then you will have to pay or not get housing benefit for that room. So for example, if you had one spare room, that might be about £9 a week, 2 spare rooms, about £14 a week. However, through some of the work, and certainly it was one of the things that certainly NIPSA as a union, we argued with all political parties, green, orange and everything in between. We don't discriminate in any way in relation to who we'll speak to, as long as we get the right outcome for our members and for citizens. So what we have been able to do is we've been able to persuade political parties not to enact the bedroom tax here in Northern Ireland. I'm sure you'll have read it about people basically having to move out of their homes because they can't afford the additional rent, or that they end up getting into major debt, which then therefore somewhere down the road the bailiffs arrive at the door and people are evicted. So if anybody talks to you about the bedroom tax, we won't have that. If you live, if you're in receipt of housing benefit, you might over the next period of months receive a letter from the housing executive, but that will not be to tell you that you will have to be impacted by that. So from here on in you can forget about the bedroom tax, but you might read lots about it. So I do think that's a major plus for us here in Northern Ireland, that we don't have that, because there's parts of England, for example, where people can no longer afford to leave, and people are having to leave, particularly if you live in some of the big cities where rents are extremely high, is that it's almost like ethnic cleansing. So it's cleansing people out of more well-off places because they can't afford to pay the rents. The other thing is that's different here in Northern Ireland than it is in the rest of the UK is in relation to, currently if you're in receipt of housing benefit, that goes straight to your landlord, whether that be the housing executive, whether that be a private sector landlord, or whether that be a housing association. So you never get the money, and you might think, I would like to get that 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds, £100 a week, and then I could do something else with it. But we fought and argued hard that the housing benefits should go straight to landlords, because the one thing is, with all of these other cuts coming down the road, is that we're all the same, is that we'll say we'll take a wee bit out of there, maybe we'll not need that much, we'll take £10 this week out of our rent and we'll use that to buy school uniforms for our kids, or it's coming up to Christmas, or whatever the issue might be, and then before you know it, you're not £10 or £20 in debt in relation to your rent, it's £100 and then it's £200 and then it creeps up. So one of the issues that certainly we argued strongly for is that rent would continue to be paid direct to the landlord, and if nothing else, then people continue to have a roof over their house. And you will hear particularly horror stories in England where again people have got into hundreds, thousands of pounds of debt and then have been evicted from their homes, and then all the issues that come with that. I suppose one of the issues that we'll go on and talk a wee bit about tonight is the issue of, you've maybe heard, universal credit. But that's not the biggest issue that's coming just right now. The biggest issue is people who are in receipt of disability living allowance, of which there's many, and there could be people in this room, or your family members or your friends. That's changing in June to what they call personal independence, personal payment, thank you. And that's going to have an impact now. That's for new claimants. From June this year, you'll have to go through a new assessment process, which is much more stringent, much more difficult to get people through a process. However, and then for people, what they call migrating on, so if you're currently in receipt of DLA or any family member or friends, is that then will be a process of which you will be moved on to what they're going to call PIP. And certainly for people in the advice centre that I've been talking to, and our members in the Social Security Agency, is that it's difficult enough to get DLA, but part of the issue is that the new PIP is filling in those forms. Is if you have maybe a physical disability, it's slightly easier. If you've got a mental health issue, the work capability assessment, as it's called, isn't really, in my view, geared towards that and can be very difficult. And potentially, people who are in receipt of DLA will be taken off. And as you know, that's a significant amount of money, and therefore this is why, again, I would continue to stress is do not just complete the forms yourself. Get advice, go to your advice workers and get advice from people who do this day and daily. And get the advice from people, because once you would be taken off the benefit, it's going to be more difficult to get back onto that benefit again. So that's another issue. Another issue you've probably heard, you may have picked up about, is a thing called the benefit cap. So at the minute there is no cap to the amount of money that you can get through the benefit system, depending on the number of children you have, your circumstances, but includes your housing element. Okay, so it includes your housing benefit. The benefit cap there will be capped at 26,000. So if you add up all of your benefits, so if you add up, say for example your rent is £80 a week, say for a 3-bedroom house, and then you add into that, so that's about, by my calculations, that's over £4,000. So that only leaves you 16,000. Sorry, so it's 26,000 at the minute, but from this summer it's gone down to 20,000. So a significant reduction. On the 26,000 cap, there was about 400 odd households in Northern Ireland impacted. So there could be people in this community impacted. Once it drops down to 20,000, there's about 4,000 to 5,000 families impacted. So there's definitely people in this room that will be impacted by that. So it'll be those with larger families, higher rents. All of those things will have a negative impact in relation to this benefit cap issue. Because I worked out very roughly £300 a week once you take your rent out. So the time you pay for your heating, your lighting, your food, kids' clothes, their Christmas presents, all of those issues, there's not very much left. In fact, there's probably nothing left. And as well as that, in relation to other issues, like for example, child benefit, and the benefit cap will also apply to in-work families. So you can see how this can have a very negative. So, and if you have more than 2 children, for those who are in receipt of tax credits, then that cap will also be impacted. So therefore, if you have more than 2 children, that will again will be capped really at 2 children. So you can't get the child element if you have more than 2 children. This is some new things that are coming down the road. Child benefit, again, that has been capped now for a period of time. It was frozen, well, I say frozen, it was 1% really, suppose from the coalition government came in 2010. They had child benefit just at a 1% increase, and now it's frozen for 4 years. So what does that actually mean? You know, so by the end of this government, so by 2020, which believe me, we'll be there before we realise it, it means that child benefit really in real terms has been decreased by £3.60. So if you just got inflation, it would be £3.60 a week more for the first child and £2.35 for subsequent children. So if you look at inflation, and I did a very rough calculation, is in another 2 or 3 years' time, a family with 3 children will be about £12 a week worse off because child benefit isn't increasing. So just think what you could do with another £12 a week. You know, you could buy perhaps your kids something more. You could put more food on the table. You could buy them that little extra for Christmas, or you could just keep the wolves from the door for another week or so. So that's some of the issues around child benefit and the benefit cap. And then there's this new benefit that's coming in called universal credit. So it'll impact on working families and out of work families. Because things like tax credits, so if you're in work and you're in low paid employment, then you'll be in receipt of child tax credits or working tax credits. but again, they're attacking the amount of money that's paid there. Housing benefit will also be in what they call universal credit. Your employment and support allowance, and your job seekers allowance, income support, and bits and pieces of social fund will all be wrapped up into this new benefit called universal credit. And it will start to be introduced from January next year. And you might think, great, because certainly as a union we would be in favour of the simplification of the whole benefit system, because it's a nightmare trying to fill in all the different forms. And you might think, well, you know, if I need to go and fill in one form to get my housing benefit and any other sort of workplace or benefits. However, that's not the case. While you only have to go to a one-stop shop, is that it's about actually paying you less overall. So one of some of the things about universal credit, which again has been now in some areas of the rest of the UK, but I mean, what they had expected, the UK government by this stage, is about 8 million people would have been on universal credit. But however, there's been so much money wasted on computer systems, is that £160 million on a system that they developed to try to deal with this was scrapped. So just think what £160 million could do for people who are, for no fault of their own, are in receipt of benefits or out of work. And that money has just been wasted, ripped up, thrown in the bin, and that IT system has been scrapped. And they're starting now with a new, or started about a year ago with a new IT system. But at this point in time, they've only got a relatively small number of people on the system, and there's as many clerical workarounds. That's because we talk to our other unions in the rest of the UK, and they give us this information. So, and what they're telling us is that, you know, if you talk to the officials of the departments and stuff, they'll tell you everything's going well, but the reality of the situation is that it's going very badly. But because so much money has been invested in this, and because it's an ideological position of taking money out of the benefit system, I mean, they said in the last budget is there was £12 million to come out of the benefit system. That's out of your pockets, that's out of working families and out of work families' pockets. This is cuts to, and I'm sure anybody in the room who is on benefits at this point in time, is you don't have lots and lots of spare cash at the end of every week to spend on things. But yet, you know, you would hear us saying as a trade union, a cabinet of millionaires, you know, so George Osborne, the Prime Minister, they're all millionaires. So they really don't care about you and I and about ordinary working families or out of work families. It's all an ideological issue. And they've introduced, as part of this universal credit thing, a thing called conditionality and sanctions. And you might think, what does all this mean? Conditionality is you will have to sign up, before you'll get this new benefit of universal credit, you will have to sign up to certain conditions. So if you're a single parent or a couple, and you've only been able to secure, you either don't have any work or you're in part-time work, you will have to say, right, well I am out of work, I'm looking for a job, and I have to now look for work 37 hours a week. And you will have to prove that you have been filling in application forms, you've been trumping around different places looking for work. Because you'll hear this phrase, you know, this is about making work pay. Well, I don't know about anybody else in this room. Okay, maybe, and I've been fortunate that I've been on a job, and I'm in a job, but say for example, I was out of work tomorrow. Okay, so it might be a week or 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I can get the papers, I can go onto the internet, I can go to the library, I can fill in forms. However, there's not that many jobs out there for people. I mean, I have 2 members of my family looking for work and they haven't got it. And believe you me, is that I keep saying to them, look, one of them's a student, and I say, go even and get, a part-time job. They're not there. So if they're not there for students, they're not there for anyone. So there isn't. And what work is there at the minute is low-paid work. So if you were, for example, working, say, 16 hours a week, that's not enough. You need to go and look for work for full-time hours. That's what they call the claimant commitment. That's what will be said in this claimant commitment, that you will be asked to complete. And if you don't complete it, and if you don't do it, then you don't get your benefit. So it's almost holding a gun to your head. In relation to some of the issues around the claimant commission, so okay, you say, right, I will actively seek work and fill in these application forms, do what I have, and you come back to your to Social Security Jobs and Benefits Office and you say, this is what I've been doing. And if you don't turn up, for example, something happens and you don't turn up and it's not a reasonable excuse, is that you can be then sanctioned. Or if you don't look for work over that period of time between one signing and the next, then you can be what they call sanctioned. And a sanction can mean that you're disqualified from benefits for 4 weeks. The next time it can be 13 weeks. And ultimately it can be 18 months. Now, there's some examples, particularly if you read the papers and things, where in England, Scotland and Wales, people can be sanctioned up to 3 years. Now, I don't know, I couldn't do without my pay for 4 weeks.
And the housing benefit as well?
Everything, yeah. Your benefits would be stopped in total. So you would be evicted. You'd be homeless, out in the street, because of what you hadn't, because you had said, now there will be reasons, and we don't have the detail of this yet, there will be reasons that will be given, but however, universal credit is in. Some of the other aspects of the welfare reform is in England, and there already is people who have been sanctioned, people with mental health issues. Perhaps they haven't turned up for their thing because they just forgot, or they were ill and they didn't turn up, and they've been sanctioned, they've been left homeless, and people have, ultimately, suppose paid the sacrifice of they've taken their own lives because they just don't know where to turn to. So, I mean, I don't want to end on that very downbeat note, because there is some positives, is that here in Northern Ireland, as I said, the trade union movement and lots of others, people working in the advice sector, the law centre, all these organisations have been keeping pressure on all political parties not to introduce the welfare reform bill. But you'll have heard the Fresh Start Agreement has brought the welfare reform bill to us here in Northern Ireland. But part of that also is that there was a lady called Eileen Evison, and her and a few other people were asked to do some what they call mitigations. So that would be some money to offset. So if you're taking off DLA, is hopefully, although the detail of this has all been worked out, so if you were taking off DLA, then there would be some additional money put in for a year. So that might give you the time to go to the advice sector, get the information that you need, fill the forms in again and reapply, so that so you won't lose your benefit in totality, and hopefully then with help and support and advice you will be able to get the benefit back again. They keep saying here is there will be no targets to reach, because certainly in England we actually found out eventually by certain people keeping pressure on politicians and Ian Duncan Smith, etc., who's the Department of Work and Pensions Minister, that there was actually targets set. So people working in the Social Security offices were told, cut the benefit by 20%, cut it by 10%. So you had to get that many people off. Now they kept saying it wasn't happening until there was a sort of a bit of an undercover issue went on, and then we found out that actually there was targets. So it wasn't about whether you were entitled to it or not, it was just about driving down the number of people who were in receipt of benefits and therefore driving down how much money the government was prepared to spend on benefits. Because the reality of it is I haven't met too many people who don't want to work. You know, we'll hear in the newspapers, the skivers and the shirkers and all of those. And those are words that are just, they're disgusting words. Because I haven't met too many people who don't want to work. I mean, we'll have the announcement here in the last week about Bombardier, not that far from where we're sitting here tonight. And 500 people will lose their jobs this year, and another 500 next year. So you go and you'll say to the politicians, are they the shavers in the script? Oh no, not those people. The people in Dunn stores, 50 people lost their jobs. No, it's not those people. And then you go, well, it's the people in Gallagher's and Ballymena. Is that the shavers, the skivers and the shirkers? And you could go on and on and on. There's people in the local shop. No, it's not those. And nobody can actually point out who these people are that's in the media. And it's a disgusting way to refer to people, and we would always challenge that. So I'll maybe stop there, because I'm sure people have lots of questions, but I'll try just to give you an overview. If you think that it's not going to happen, then wake up and smell the coffee, as they say. It is going to happen. The trade union movement has fought the battle hard, and we will continue to fight, and we will continue to support people who are in the situation where you're losing money hand over fist. And I think, and you know, it'd be nice to have more people here this evening, but the reality of it is that I think people's heads are down. People think it isn't going to happen to me, it's going to be the person across the road or up the street or somebody else. It's not going to happen to me, because we've been fighting this welfare reform thing. People have been fighting this, and it's been pushed off, and maybe it will not happen. I've some leaflets here as well, and I know some maybe live in the area. Lord Street in Avonale is that tenants in those housing executive properties there will received a letter probably 2-3 weeks ago talking about transferring your homes to a housing association. So this isn't just happening here. This is happening in areas in Ballymena, in Larne, in Rossville, in Derry, Londonderry, and in Portadown, Lurgan, and But we would argue, and I'll leave some leaflets here, but there has been two estates where this has already happened, or houses where this has happened. One was in the Craigan, it was the first one, up in Londonderry, and the housing executive rents pre the improvement was £52. It was supposed to go up to about £54. Those people are now paying in excess of £86. And while housing benefit might cover that, is that I have no doubt down the road is that housing benefit is going to be cut like every other benefit. Universal credit will impact on housing benefit, and therefore we would be asking people through this leaflet exercise, and we probably will have other meetings in those communities about this specific issue. But anybody who lives in that area or friends live in that area have some leaflets here, and if you take them with you and spread them around, and then we will do some further work on that in relation to why we would ask people when it becomes the time is to vote against the transfer of your home from the housing executive to a different landlord, probably a housing association, but we'll keep that for another day. So I've probably talked long enough here, so I'll maybe hand back.